What is up, everybody? Jim to my right, Mr. Adam Maxwell across from us. Brace yourself.
Nice.
Pistol braces are back, baby. They're back.
Did they ever leave? It's debatable.
For some, yes, maybe. For some, no, maybe. I'm
Depends
sure.
on who you are.
I think, there's probably a lot of folks out there that are reassembling, right, Jim?
Sure.
Some people are...
It's like railroads. Sometimes they're underground.
Yeah. Probably some folks, if they have heard that pistol braces are back, are like, man, I should get one of these things because they're pretty darn practical.
It's nice. Now, we're speaking with a firearms philatelist, which we...
The word of the day.
We just put that word together. Thanks, ChatGPT, for letting us know what the name for a stamp collector is.
We did also look up how to pronounce it. I think it's a philatelist.
Yeah, I think that might be right. Maybe an English major can chime in here.
Yeah, because it's a big word.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna make sure I spell it correctly on Instagram when I put it on my profile.
Now, Jim, why are you classifying Adam as a firearms philatelist?
Well, as a stamp collector, Adam's the kind of guy that he doesn't really mess around a whole lot with the pistol brace thing. He just kind of SBRs everything.
Yep.
And so naturally, we've decided to bring him on the Pistol Podcast. Now, the pistol brace thing, maybe somebody out there isn't fully accustomed to it yet. It did become a topic of notable contention, debate, a lot of very what's the word? Passionate people were speaking about it in the firearms industry. And we have so many new people in the firearms industry that maybe they were just kind of like thrust into this suddenly and like, you need to have an opinion on this. And they're like, well, I don't really, what
are you talking about?
What you're holding there looks, what's a pistol brace? You know what I mean? Like that doesn't look like a pistol. When I think of a pistol in my head, I think of a Glock, a 1911. There's usually not a thingy on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And a brace, Jim.
A brace, right. But in their mind, maybe it's a thingy.
I can tell you there was one group of people that were talking about it the most and had the biggest contention about it. I think most of the people that just like to have, own, buy firearms just liked them.
Right.
Well, it was very...
Am I wrong?
I think it kind of hit... There's like ebbs and flows in the industry of like when a product can hit and it catches fire. And I think this just caught one of those nodes because I was still in retail gun sales when the first pistol braces hit the market. The original SB Tactical brace. It was actually a SIG product at the time.
Yeah, I remember that. I mean, for a long time, people called it the SIG brace.
Yeah, they could just call it the SIG brace.
That.
And it was primed at that time. I mean, AR pistols, it existed far before that. Like when I first bought my first AR and went to a store that had lots of ARs, they had them. It was just a smooth buffer tube. And I'm like, well, that's... Why would you want that?
Yeah.
I didn't really get it at the time. And then they introduced this accessory that started to kind of look stock-ish and enhance what an AR pistol was. And the buzz about it it flew very under the radar initially because when they submitted it, because any sort of accessory like that has to get approved by ATF. And so at that time, I feel like that particular manufacturer was kind of thumbing their nose at the ATF a bit, and they were kind of seeing what they could get away with. They also came out with a muzzle brake at the time that was essentially a suppressor without an outer housing on it. And then you would buy the outer housing later, and that would have the serial number, and that's what you would register.
Adam, was that a solvent trap?
No, but it was in that era.
Thing. Okay,
yeah,
right.
it was actually like it was a baffle stack.
Oh,
like
okay.
any smart person could see that this is a suppressor baffle stack, and then later you could buy the sleeve to go over it and make it a suppressor. They were trying this kind of thing at the time to see what they could get away with, and ATF signed off on pistol braces, and everyone was like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah,
like
which
they actually said that was cool.
Which, to give even a little more context, still yet a rifle. There are
I'm gonna add personal opinion, which they should have.
Oh yeah,
I think people were just surprised.
People were super. They're like, really? That's way cooler than ATF usually is.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and of course, there's 1,000 rabbit trails we could go on with this about ATF and do they even have the power to actually do anything? Which, of course, many people are screaming the answer at the radios right now. But you know, we gotta still try and tread lightly because in the end we are still attached to Vortex optics here. This isn't just a a personal rant podcast. But so rifles though, let's get into that real quick. The ATF defines them as having a barrel of 16 inches or greater, and basically having a shoulder thingy that goes up. That's designed, a stock. That's designed to make the firearm be shoulder fired. There may be a few other definitions in there, but that's the basic gist of it. Now, there are a number of instances in which having a rifle, or a firearm of less than 16 inches in barrel length, but still something at the back to make it a little bit more stable for shooting, would be advantageous. And, really the only way to go about doing that previously was to make it a short-barreled rifle, and then you have to pay a $200 tax stamp, and there is the arduous waiting period. Now, guys like Adam are just kind of like, whatever, I will just pay the tax stamp, and then I'll just wait. And I think a lot of people are, starting to get into that more and more because there's no gray area whatsoever. You just do it, and you're done. But the pistol brace thing started to give you a thing at the back that looked similar to a stock, and some people were, taking creative liberties with how it was used. And because it was a pistol, because as we know, if you are newer to this and you think of a pistol, you think of a Glock or a 1911, like I mentioned earlier, they might have a 4-inch barrel, they might have a 3-inch barrel, a 5-inch barrel, they can have really short barrels, and they are not regulated because they're pistols by the ATF in such a way that would require you to have to go through extra paperwork and extra tax stamps, and all that stuff. So that's kind of why the pistol brace thing was interesting, because suddenly people had things that looked closer to rifles with shorter barrels, but they were designated as a pistol.
Well, and the NFA was very stagnant at the time. Like it was pretty solid. It had been in since 1921. It's kind of like pistol ranges. Like pistol shooting was one thing. And then the generation of, the current generation of action shooters, they started doing something else. So before it was like, well, one shot per second. Like that's no rapid fire at this range because we have to be under control. Well, now here's a bunch of people, they're actually in a lot of control of the shooting, and it happens at about 0.2 of a second, Mm-hmm. So it was kind of that thing where I think it opened the floodgates to challenge the essence and perhaps even ultimately the constitutionality of the NFA, because now we have this thing, and they kind of opened the door a crack, and people ran through it.
Oh, charged through it, and then I think to get to the topic of the podcast, like ATF has gone through iterations of trying to walk that back, and most recently. They issued a final ruling or whatever that is. Air quotes.
Of, okay, no, you can't use those. You have to register and blah, blah, blah. And people were like, wait a minute. You said it was cool. Now you said it's not cool.
Are millions of us suddenly criminals, destined to a federal penitentiary or something like that?
The real question is, does the ATF have the authority to do that? That is, and will be challenged in court. But they essentially called the 2A community's bluff. We're going to say, no, you can't do that. And so we're like, okay, we'll see what the Supreme Court has to say about that. And it has been working its way up the chain since then. Almost all of the significant rulings have fallen in favor of that is unconstitutional, A, and B, it's outside of ATF's purview to make rules. Rules, laws, legislation, that is for the legislative branch, the Senate and Congress, to make laws, and then the executive branch is in charge of enforcement of those laws, under which are agencies like the ATF. The ATF is not an elected body, so they aren't it's beyond the scope of what they're allowed to do to make law. They have an interpretive component, which is where all this got muddy.
Yeah.
They can't just say no more green pistols. They can't do that. Okay, that, just Schoolhouse Rock, that has to go up and everybody's got to vote on it, and then they can enforce that. They can't unilaterally say, well, we think that green pistols are not in the spirit of the law. And that's currently what's being challenged. And so when we say they're back, essentially that's a response to court cases being decided that the final ATF ruling on pistol braces have to be registered has not been upheld as enforceable to the present date.
Right. This just in, ATF has also been caught trying to burn copies of Schoolhouse Rock.
Oh,
just
no.
And
that's fake news. But also I wouldn't doubt it.
Possibly.
and communes in Texas.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's kind of there's a lot of people out there who have been talking about this. I'd say much more. What's the word? Yeah, from the legalese standpoint, I've seen a few of them on YouTube. Like you have guys like the Armed Scholar and some of the other folks who really know the language of how laws are made, and they also know a lot more of the behind the scenes. Obviously, you can tell that that's not me. I did not go to school for anything like that because even some of the terminology is completely over my head. All I know is that the rule, I mean, the NFA in general, got my personal opinions on it. But then when you say something is okay and then you try to walk it back after millions of people have gone about and gotten that thing that you said was okay, when you try to walk it back and suddenly make them criminals, that's not cool. And luckily, it has been, pretty officially deemed that it's not cool, and so pistol braces are back. We have a pistol on the table now with a pistol brace on it. And
it essentially, for a time there, I mean, like, the retailers didn't want even the most Pro 2A of the Pro 2A were like, all right, but we're a business. For the time being, we're going to go ahead and pump the brakes on selling these things.
Yeah, you don't want to all of a sudden just be out of business and
Whereas,
all that stuff.
I think you can log on to whatever your favorite retailer is today, and you can buy a pistol version of whatever you would like. Whereas 6 months ago, 8 months ago, that was harder. People were like, we're gonna kind of wait and see on a couple of these key.
Well, I think
everybody knew that they wanted to sell pistol braces again, but no one wanted to be the first because it was kind of well, am I about to be thrown in jail or lose my business? And luckily we're pretty well past that.
It's a trap.
I think, personal opinion, that shows the mindset and of folks who are, pro pistol brace, but they're also pro, I want to be a law-abiding citizen.
Mm-hmm.
That's at the heart of who they are as a person or as a business. Mm-hmm. That's the vast majority of people out there.
Yeah. I mean, hundreds, I don't even know what the estimations were of how many have been sold.
I know it was millions.
Yeah, so there's millions of these that were purchased by people who essentially were like, okay, well, this is the most legal way for me to get what I want.
Right.
Without crossing some people had the personal threshold. It was like, well, I don't want to register something. So I was given this avenue to buy this thing that's in the same vein or similar vein, and I don't have to register it. So that was a win for them. But then to walk that back, that's very...
Yeah. I think what you really get at kind of the tough situation that people can be put in where so many, well, I could say all of the firearms owners and enthusiasts that I know, it's like they aren't seeking to be lawbreakers or criminals.
No.
You know what I mean? They would actually very much like to be considered a law-abiding citizen and not have any trouble, not have anybody be coming after them for something that they want to do that, is for their own personal protection. I mean, everything that it says in the Second Amendment.
Right.
And so it's kind of one of those things like, it's like you're trying to go after the wrong people.
Right.
Here, like if you want to go after criminals, go after criminals. Criminals don't care if you make another rule. There's already loads of rules that they don't care about breaking. So if you make another one, you've only further made it harder for people who already would really like to try to be not criminals. Right. It's just, I think you see where I'm getting at with that. And so it's like when you tell those people who are simply trying to enjoy their hobby, have a means for self-defense, home defense, protection against a tyrannical government, whoever it is,
pest control.
When you try and make their life harder to do those things, it's like you're just being a jerk.
Well, and that kind of thing, I mean, the foundation of our society is that kind of thing has to be brought up by elected representatives, go through the legislative process, win by majority, and be signed into law. A nonpartisan, non-elected entity isn't the entity that does that in our society. And I think a lot of people took issue with that. And also, I mean, on a bigger, there are actually good people that work at ATF, and guess what? They got better things to do than this, right?
I kind of hope they have better things to do than this.
Most of them do. Most of them do. So it's kind of one of those things. It's like pick your political issue, but sometimes it's like, really, that's what you're going to spend your time on. This is what we're going to spend our time on. Like, don't we have aren't there actually bad things that we need to take care of, and really bad people that we need to put in jail? Yeah, that's kind of where I think a lot of people are on with it.
Agreed.
Can we talk about in my opinion, the extreme practicality that comes with a pistol of this form factor?
Yeah. I love it. The firearm on the table is it belongs to someone that I know. But it's great not having I don't know how 16 inches ever was the number that they came up with. I think it's when you really think about
arbitrary.
It's very arbitrary.
It's very arbitrary.
But I mean, a 16-inch gun has its place.
Yeah.
But having a shorter gun is nice for many instances. I mean, everybody talks about having a truck gun. I don't love having a 16-inch truck gun.
No,
it's nice having something smaller in tight spaces, and your home defense rig and stuff like that. Anytime that you don't want to be pointing around a pole vault stick off your shoulder, it's nice to have something shorter and more compact. Now, I have also heard this is what I've heard from some people, that they prefer having a pistol. In the case of a truck gun or something like that, they say that there are, depending on state, there can be rules against carrying a loaded rifle in your vehicle versus a loaded pistol, like if you were concealed carrying something like that. And so something that is, slightly larger form factor, it has a brace of some sort on it. It shoots a caliber that is greater and more powerful than something like a 9mm or really any of the, traditional pistol cartridges. Having something like that is nice. They can carry it around. It can be loaded. It can be ready to shoot, coyotes or whatever on the farm or something along those lines. And then, if anybody ever questioned them on it, hey, it's a pistol. It's not a rifle.
Well, yeah, I mean, everybody's got their own applications, and so different parts of the country, people have different needs. And by and large, carrying around a rifle in public is not an acceptable practice. So if you want to carry around something of this form factor, you do have to conceal it from open view. And that's where, things like this folding pistol brace. Okay, well, if you want to carry, you've gone through the process of being a licensed concealed carry permit holder. All right, well, if you've gone through that process, here's something you can use if you want to use, the satchel type bags, the backpack gun type stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Or a lot of times when I use something like this, I'm not necessarily carrying it around, but in my vehicle, it's in a bag like that so that it's camouflaged in a parking lot, while I'm in the gas station paying or whatever, quick sight inside the window is not gun case, it's more discreet.
Yeah.
In your daily life. And I mean, I carry around a lot of rifles for my professional capacity here. They're big. It's a lot of stuff. Like if you're adding a rifle to your day-to-day, that's a big piece of equipment. Not everybody wants to add that. So it lends itself a lot more to the utility and the daily use type of stuff, especially if you don't need the extended range capabilities of what a full-length rifle is going to do for you.
Yeah. I do love the idea too of of a backpack gun. There's a lot of compromises people make to concealed carry a firearm, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't go about concealed carrying a 9mm pistol, for example. That is really probably the most concealable form of carrying a firearm. And it doesn't rely on obviously wearing your backpack. There are times where you don't want to be attached to your backpack. But with something like these larger caliber pistols, an AR pistol chambered in 5.56, chambered in 300 blackout. This particular firearm is chambered in 5.7. Obviously, people have their opinions on the 5.7 round. But you get more firepower. And, when it's small like this, it can fit easily into a backpack. And so, I don't think there's anyone out there who, if you're carrying a firearm for self-defense, wouldn't like to have as much firepower as possible.
Right.
Again, you make some compromises sometimes, but, with something like this, you can have more in that small.
Well, I mean, it's just another way to essentially do the same thing, and both are going to have pros and cons to them, right? Depending on what you're trying to do or your main application. One thing that I like about this, Jim, originally when we had it on the table, you had the suppressor on it. Well, even for like some of my hunting rifles or, rifles that I plan on getting or whatever, I'm looking very hard at going to a shorter barrel, sacrificing some velocity, sacrificing some long-range performance, because I'm prioritizing the form factor and the length that a suppressor will add to that firearm, right?
Yeah.
So this is a great option to, if you do want to use a suppressor, you are the overall package at the end of the day is still going to be fairly compact.
Adding a suppressor onto the end of a 16-inch gun turns it into a, 22, 24-inch gun very easy sometimes. So,
and the other thing too, I'm not anti-pistol, by the way. I love regular pistols, they're hard to at least for me, they're hard to shoot. I could definitely be more accurate, more precise, potentially in some environments, a safety component, or like with that accuracy, like obviously never take an unsafe shot. So this might increase your capability to take safer shots at distance, perhaps.
Sure.
I don't know.
Well, and on the civilian side, worst case scenario for self-defense, in my head, usually goes to some form of active shooter in an office, a retail, or a school setting. Now, I'm not a parent, so I'm not in the school setting very often, but you go and walk around a big box retail store, that's a big place. And these types of crimes are becoming more and more prevalent in the day and age for whatever reason, but it is something that people of this mindset probably have to think about. So where it's cited that the average self-defense shooting is 3 seconds, 3 yards, 3 rounds. Okay, well, that's average. Worst case scenario, check out at Costco. All right. And so having something like this around is more amenable to handling something like that. And then
I think that's what I was trying to get at.
And so I have two bags, if you will, that I go out on the daily with. One of them is for the airport, and it is as sterile as it gets. It has chargers and chapstick and computers. That's what it has. The other one has something like this for that reason. If I'm in or around a vehicle, which is a big part of my job, or I live in I work in a permissive environment where that kind of stuff can come and go. Okay, well so I can bring something like that with. As permissive as Vortex is, I feel like HR would have an issue if you just walk in with an Eberly stock pack and a DMR rifle every day. It's going to be an issue. So something smaller like this lends itself to that kind of application. And then in that same vein, NFA is restrictive to law enforcement too. All right, law enforcement still has to register those items. They still have to go through the ATF process. It's more streamlined than civilian process, kind of. Now, with some of the responses to recent school shootings, Texas being a key one, post Uvalde, every Texas school has to have a uniformed liaison officer on campus if the students are present. Okay, was working with a customer in that lane very recently. And so, okay, well, we have a police department. They're here. They're handling this kind of stuff. But that chief was expressing, all right, well, you have to understand, like, I'm a police officer, yes, and I'm retired out of a metro SWAT team that does a lot of warrants. Okay, but now I'm in a school. I'm a police chief of a school police department. And while I'm a police officer and a police chief, I report to a superintendent. A superintendent is not a law enforcement official. They are an educator. So now a police chief has to explain to an educator why he needs this portion of a budget for something like this, which is its own uphill. And then if he wants something like this with a stock on, he's like, and
$200 tax stamp.
Yeah, it's not $200 tax stamp, but just the registration process, just the bureaucracy of it kills it a lot of times. And so the pistol braces make equipment like this more accessible to police departments too. And guns that fit into backpacks that can be toted around discreetly by law enforcement officers is a significant market. And that's a lot of these are sold in that application.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
That's
I didn't know that either. But again, to me, it speaks to the practicality of the form factor.
Right.
Yeah.
Because they want law enforcement officers, around a high school football game. But parents don't want to see someone in an armor vest and BDU clothes walking around. Now, a plainclothes police officer with a academic looking backpack on, that is far less intimidating. It doesn't distract from that. This is a community gathering and kids, and we're engaging in sport, but there are the sheepdogs on the perimeter that have to have an eye towards keeping this under control, and that's where we can use things like this. That comes out of the executive protection world and all that stuff. I mean, the people around the president aren't always allowed to have rifles. They, for the most part, they have to look like they're wearing suits. And you can't tell which ones are the officials and which ones are the bodyguards. All right, same thing in and around our schools and our communities and things like that. People, I think by and large, want this kind of stuff around, but they don't want to see it. And that's what it lends itself well to.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of this revolves around it is, I think that there was a sigh of relief for a win of this battle.
Absolutely.
If you will, because it was like, hey, it's nice to see, especially when you're in the firearms community, when something kind of goes your way. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, why it ever took a divergence in the route that wasn't going to go our way and was actually going to make things more restrictive and worse in the first place, that stinks. And then the fact that there are restrictions that the pistol brace is kind of let's just put it plainly, like kind of a way of getting around. Mm-hmm. The fact that those restrictions existed in the first place and still really do, like for a law enforcement officer or for somebody who's just having that backpack gun, truck gun, whatever it is, to have to go about being like, no, like this is a pistol brace and have all these, weird little nuanced things that they have to go through in order to get what it is that they ultimately need, which is a small form factor but large caliber shooting, essentially an SBR. Like we need to make SBRs just not so annoying to get.
Well, and I think that's happening because now, because of these challenges and whatnot, essentially agencies like ATF have to explain to not gun people, i.e. judges,
right?
Okay, well, this is a rule, and we say because. And they're like, okay. And then the other side says, well, but this thing, other than this difference here, is the same as this thing. And this thing has this process. And they're like, the impartial person is trying, he's like, I see the same thing here. I don't. So right. It's not just that pistol braces are back. It's raising the question of like, well, wait, why are you forcing people to register SBRs anyway?
Right.
And then, so that and they don't have a strong argument for that. Their comeback is, well, they're averting the tax. So the the reason that they say that this has to be registered is because they are averting paying the $200 tax. So
you're talking about
the
What are we, Al
SBR.
Capone?
Yeah.
Like you're trying to get us on tax evasion now?
That's
or something
literally
like
what
that?
they're trying to do.
It's like,
so and so it didn't stand on the merits of why SBRs are significantly more dangerous than pistols.
Right.
That didn't hold up. So they went to, well, they're averting the tax. And then it's like, okay, so we need to make people felons so they pay a one-time $200 tax.
right.
And at the current state, my perception of the current state, and you mentioned Armed Scholar, he's the best source that I find. When I consume on this, I watch his stuff. So go watch his stuff.
I catch a guy every now and again, Washington gun law.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He seems pretty dialed into.
My understanding of the current state of things is like the NFA itself isn't really holding a lot of legal water right now. And I think it's because we started with the crack of, hey, this is kind of like that. And well, if this is kind of like that, then, I think it's opening the floodgate for other stuff. If we were ever going to change the NFA, repeal the NFA, or if the NFA was going to be cemented, I think the pistol brace squared the conversation and the contention of that.
It's kind of an interesting pendulum, if you will, because they're like, well, you can have it because of this. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, well, wait, no, you can't have it because it's too close to this. And now it's almost swinging back, well,
why can't you have that?
Maybe you can have this.
Why can't we have it all?
Because it's close to that.
Yeah.
Did anybody follow that?
Yeah.
It'd be like explaining to a non-car person that 3,500 trucks have just been made illegal, but you can have a 2,500 truck, no problem.
Right.
And then they'd be like,
Wait, what?
It's the same truck. And then he'd be like, well, there's this, kind of. And then they'd be like, I don't get it,
Because I have your trailer on. It's like, but I don't have a heavier trailer.
Yeah. I've never explained it to a non-gun person when they've come over to my house. I'm like, okay, I'm going to show you guns, and they're like, okay. And then they go down and they're like, well, tell me about that rifle. I'm like, funny story. That's a pistol. And they're like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, I know.
And that's why I have it.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, just some interesting food for conversation here, and Adam and I mentioned, and Mark mentioned, there are some sources that you can go to if this is all still a bit new to you. There's some sources that you can go to out there that get far more into the legalese of the matter. The important, and like I said, at least moderately exciting, but don't think we're completely necessarily out of the woods on legislative BS. But the important thing to know is pistol braces are back though, baby. And I'm excited. I have a couple of guns with pistol braces on them. I did, and then, there was a period of time where I just can't remember. And then, now I still have some guns with pistol braces on them, and so I like them.
I don't know.
I'm very glad.
They're super functional. I
also have some SBRs, and I'm like, well, if really all my guns that had pistol braces on them could just be SBRs, then I'd also be happy about that. I just need to keep doing. I need to be a philanderer or whatever.
No, that's not it. Philanthropist.
Yeah, philanthropist.
Yeah.
Evangelist.
Yeah.
What was the original word?
Flippy doist. A philatelist. That's what it was.
Stamp collector.
Amphibian?
Yes.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
Rights are like muscles. The more you exercise them, the stronger they get. So the more common this kind of stuff is, the harder it is for them to take it away from us.
True. Let's be honest, that was a big component in them reversing this thing, was because it was like, are we all criminals?
Well, if they would have tried it in 2015, probably would be having a completely different conversation.
Right.
But there's millions of these in common circulation, and that's some of the operative language around this is like, well, it's in common usage now.
Common use.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's in common usage now, so, no givesies backsies.
There you go, folks.
Yeah.
Exercise your rights.
I thought you said you weren't, going to do all that legal talk, and then you drop no givesies backsies. It's pretty technical stuff, Adam.
You'd be like that sometimes.
Awesome. Well, I like it, everybody. I like that pistol braces are back. Adam, I liked your advice of exercising your rights. they're only going to get stronger. They're like a muscle. Let's end on that.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you have any questions, ask them. Like you said, Jim, we gave people a couple sources that, are probably pretty astute when it comes to the technical side of these things. And
we're going to do a podcast on this gun, too, by the way.
Oh, yeah. And then we're going to chat all about the one that we have on the table here because it's really, really cool.
The more questions you ask, the more podcasts that they have us do.
Yes.
Correct.
Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you on the next one.
Bye, everyone.